this video, I will be playing the Pegasus system opening against a 1900 opponent. So the Pegasus system opening starts with pawn to d4. My opponent plays pawn to d5, and I will be playing knight to d2. This opening is becoming more and more popular for white, and many people are actually switching to this opening, but for most people, it's still pretty unknown how you need to play against it as black. So my opponent is trying one of the more aggressive ways that you can try to play against the Pegasus system, which is to play c5 immediately. And most of the time when my opponent does this, they actually end up completely blundering the game, because they give us a free pawn from the beginning. And if we just take it and we try to hold on to it, it's not so easy for black to win back the pawn. They can win it back if they play all of the single best top engine moves one after the other, but for most people, that's not what's going to happen. They will not be able to win back that pawn so easily. And that just means that we are going to have an extra pawn for the rest of the game. So they play b6, which is already not the best move. I do have to think how to deal with it because I haven't seen it in a while. I think I can just take it. And that basically solidifies the fact that we have one extra pawn there. Yeah, this is now just clearly an extra pawn. And they take with the queen. Okay. We have to watch out that we don't lose this. So I can play either a3 or I can play c3. So we protect it. And that's just the plan. We just want to make sure that we don't blunder back the pawn. And as long as we don't blunder back the pawn, this is just going to be a pawn of middle game. And I think that this is so incredibly funny that whenever you play this opening, the opponents always think that they are being smart and that they are playing good chess because they are immediately playing the c5, and then they just always mess up the game and end up giving away a free pawn. It's actually pretty funny. So a bunch of moves are good here for white. What we basically want is we want to now turn this into a middle game where we are going to have 3 pawns against 1, which means that if we keep pushing the pawns, eventually we will be creating a passed pawn. And with that passed pawn, of course, if we can promote it, that's going to win us the game. And that is very likely. Almost every time I play this, that is exactly what happens because we just have extra pawns. So knight f3 is always a good move to attack this. If they push, which is very common, we also have the very good d4 square for the knight. Bishop b2 is also important so that we are protecting this and also attacking the center. So I will be playing that. Pawn to a3 is also very important so that we can strengthen that pawn. Even when it's not really necessary, it is important to always keep adding defenders to this, which is what I will do. And by playing it this way, we are basically now just guaranteed that we are going to have a middle game with the extra pawn. So that is all we need to do. We need to play a middle game from here. I am looking to develop the bishop and castle quickly, and then just play a very simple middle game. So we have pressure, but it's protected. This pawn is protected already. Queen b3 is often also a good move there. Getting your queen involved with the center and also adding one more protection to this pawn. A good move for black is often also to try to play a5 and to attack and then maybe try to take something there, but it's not really going to do anything here. So very interesting moment here. The opponent plays bishop to a6. Bishop to a6. Because they want to try to make castling impossible. But I will just take that. And I will play queen to e2. And you might think, wait a minute, queen to e2, but what if he takes? Then you lose the castling rights. You will have to recapture with the king, yes. But I have this very important rule that the moment the queens are off the board, we are in an endgame. And in an endgame, you want to get your king to the center as quickly as possible. So if my opponent goes for this trade, they are basically helping me because they will be activating my king a little bit closer to the center. They will be connecting my rooks. And also, they are just trading pieces. And since we are already in a winning position, trading pieces is actually what we want. If we can just keep trading and then start pushing those 3 pawns, we are going to get a passed pawn. and that will just guarantee us the game. So I don't know if they will take it, but if they do take it, we just have a very simple middle game from there. Pawn to c4 is also a good move oftentimes here, because with pawn to c4 we are trying to break open the center, activate the bishop, activate the knight, and then we just have the remaining 2 versus 1, which means that as long as we keep pushing them, we are going to have a passed pawn on that side of the board. So that's why I played queen to e2. Okay, so they do take. They do take. So I recapture. And now we just have an endgame. E4 always looks like a good move for black, but it's actually a bad move because it just gives us a better square for the knight as well. Bishop d6. Well, it protects this, but it doesn't really do much else. So I am looking at c4, because if they don't take, we have c5. If they do take, we get the knight here, and then we have 3 attackers against e5. And if they push, we also win the pawn. So I think c4 is a very good move here. And also I want to, of course, activate the rooks. I want to get my rooks to the d and c files, probably. If my king, by the way, ever gets in trouble, I can always dodge to f1 and just put the king there, but it's better to only do it once we already have a rook into the game. So I think this is good. I feel like they almost need to capture, because this is very important for endgames. If they capture, it will be 2 versus 1, right? We will have 2 pawns versus 1. If they don't capture, we could potentially push, and then it's going to be 3 pawns versus 1, and that's just completely impossible for them to defend. They choose to play e4 instead, which I guess they can try. The question is, do we want to exchange another pair of pieces? Well, I have to be careful, because they would be able to take with a check, and then they would recapture, so we would actually be losing there. So I have no choice except but to move the knight. But knight to d4 is the move that I wanted to play anyways in that position. And now I think they really need to capture there. If they don't capture, as I said, it's going to be a 3 versus 1 endgame with the pawns. If they do capture, it's going to be a 2 versus 1, which is still winning for us, but it's slightly worse than the 3 versus 1. And this is also something that you can start thinking about in your own games, no matter what opening you play. That is these pawns, because many players don't think about this, but it actually matters on which side of the board you have your pawns, and also how far advanced that they are. For example, if we advance, then this pawn cannot stop us, so it's basically 3 versus 1. While here the central pawn can actually eliminate a flank pawn and equal out the battle basically a little bit. So I feel like they pretty much have to take if they don't want to get in trouble. Otherwise, I will gladly play c5, and then it's just game over, I think, from there. Bishop e5 is a little bit annoying, I think, because, like, it attacks the knight, not really a problem, but it also pins the knight to the bishop, so that's a bit of an annoying move. But I think they don't really have time for it here. They would need to capture first, and then we would be controlling that square. Okay, so they do play it immediately, which I completely did not expect. I just said that I thought this was impossible. Simply because I think we push. I think we just push, and now we have the 3 versus 1 that I talked about. And okay, we will need to solve this problem, but we already have the 3 versus 1, so that's very good. And we can easily solve it by just putting the rooks there, for example. So this is going to be the most beautiful example of how you can play the Pegasus, and how black is basically completely unprepared to play against this. If you want to learn more about this opening, by the way, you should definitely go to pegasuschess.com, where I have an entire course on how to play this opening. Rook here doesn't really do anything, it's just useless. Pushing, I don't think we need to push so early. I mean, What we have here is we have a long-term advantage. A long-term advantage, meaning that no matter what happens, we are always going to have a 3 versus 1 on this side of the board. So we don't need to rush it. We don't need to immediately start pushing and also creating weaknesses. We can take it slow. We can do a build-up. We can get some more pieces into the game. That's the strategy. A5 is an interesting choice because they are trying to break apart the structure. But it also means that if we push, we could potentially get a 2 pawns versus nothing, which would be incredible. So I am looking at push because they cannot really take, right? They would be losing a knight. Push. Let's say knight b6. And then I push one more. The only question is, what if I push and they take the knight? Then I take the knight, and they have a hanging bishop and a hanging rook, which would also be winning for us. So if we push, they go to b6, I push again, and we have 2 passed pawns. And that's basically what I wanted. The knight cannot immediately infiltrate, nothing is hanging, and nothing's really hanging. Except for the fact that b5 would be a little weak, but it's easy to protect with the rook and with the knight. So I think that they just messed up, because this is a good example again of what I said, the pawns pushing up the board. And by advancing, they basically eliminated their own option of trying to stop the pawn. So it's just going to be 2 versus nothing, which is definitely better than if it was, for example, 1 pawn versus nothing. So they take here. My idea is just that we take this, and they have a hanging rook, and they have a hanging bishop. And if they move the rook, we take the bishop. If they take my bishop, I take that rook with check, and then I recapture. So all of this is fine. And then in the end, we can also take or push and get into an endgame there. The endgame is probably going to be, well, still winning for us. But I mean, if they take, we take. Yeah, we are just going to be up a rook, right, in that endgame. So they are just in trouble. They took a piece, we took a piece, and they have 2 hanging pieces. Yeah, so they have to take it. We can recapture. I think the bishop makes sense because we are also controlling the knight, which is very important. We are controlling all of the squares the knight can go to. And now we just have only 1 pawn remaining, but that's good. And we can still try to push it. But the most important thing is that we are literally just up a full bishop, right? At this point, we are just up a full bishop. So this should be easy. And this really shows how incredibly, incredibly strong this opening is, because this position, I have had this so many times. Like, I have lost count how many games I have that are almost identical to this. I think even on this channel, there are probably 3 or 4 more videos where it's just we play, we have 1 extra pawn, and they start dropping pieces. And if they don't drop pieces, we just push, and the pressure gets too much. Now that we are up a full bishop, I don't really care about this pawn that much anymore. I am mostly thinking about trading. How can I trade pieces? Trading rooks would be very good. Trading knights would be good as well. So I'm just looking to trade. That's the biggest priority. This move was to be expected. Looks like a good move for them. They are infiltrating. But I think it's actually not that amazing, because we can just block with the rook. And if they take, that's a trade. They can infiltrate. We can go back. They can go here. And then we can get the final rook into the game. And if you were able to follow all of that, you will see that that position is also completely winning for white. So this is also good. Okay, that was also to be expected. They don't want to trade because they realize that if they trade, they will be getting into a losing endgame. But now I think we have one of the most simple endgames. We have a pawn, we have 2 rooks behind it, and we can push it. And that's just very difficult. This is going to be how we can force trades. So if you have a smart opponent, when they are losing, they won't want to trade pieces with you. But you can oftentimes force trades by attacking them, for example, or here by pushing a passed pawn. And maybe we will lose the pawn at some point, which doesn't really matter as long as we can try to get them to trade something in exchange for winning that pawn, or in exchange for stopping that pawn. That's the strategy. Plus, in between, we can always keep proposing rook trades, and they can basically never accept it, because if they do, they will be in trouble. So I am looking at push, push, and then we need to find a way to attack the rook. This doesn't work. That doesn't work, so we will need to figure out something else. I might need to get the knight into the game, but the knight is actually quite badly placed. All right, instantly I have to play this. Why? Well, this is a trade. The trades are very important. And even as I said, if I lose that pawn or something, I don't really care. I just wanted to trade. So I'm looking what I could do here. I think rook here would be interesting. It's potentially offering a trade, and we can slide over there and try to win the pawn. I think that's interesting. So yeah, let's start with that. Let's just see what they do. I could also try to use the fact that they have a weak back rank to force a trade, but to do that I would need to attack a rook and basically also be guaranteed that I can just go to the back rank. So I would need to get a rook there and have it be supported, which I don't think is really possible. Another move I expected, but now my idea is to go here, and that pawn is dropping. And if they slide over the rook, that pawn is promoting. So it's just impossible for black. This is really good endgame lesson here. How to win this endgame. Because I am pretty much trying to win this endgame even without using the extra piece I have. Like, I have an extra piece, but I'm just completely not using it. It's just here to shield my king from checks. And I'm going to outmaneuver him with the rooks and use the fact that we have the passed pawn to try to win. Okay. And winning this is actually a big deal because it opens up a lot of possibilities. For example, it opens up the possibility of attacking that rook and then forcing it to move, which will, every single time that happens, help us to push the pawn one square. So I'm simply looking at this move. I only have to watch out that I don't end up in a situation where he has two rooks against my knight. That would not be what we want. I also just realized knight c4 is actually quite good because we get our final piece into the game and we also attack the rook. So maybe it's worth moving our king. Yeah, it might be worth moving our king. So that unpins the knight, so I can play knight c4. The other option I think was also decent, which was to do this and this. The only thing I didn't really like is that they double up against that knight, and then I had to play defense, and then they can attack my pawn from behind. And in general, you never want to allow your opponent to attack your pawns from behind. That's just not a good strategy. Okay, I expected this as well. They are trying to take away the square from the knight, but it's not really a problem because now the pressure of that knight is gone and it's also no longer pinned. So I think now I can do the other maneuver, which is rook here and then rook up. And I think that's just going to help us for another trade. Even if they try the same thing, we can just start pushing there. Yeah, okay. And that's the idea, that we attack the rook. And if they take, that's good because we have another trade. If they don't take, we are going to be able to push and it's just unstoppable. Okay. So we push, and this is how you can win this endgame. You just keep going, and if you keep going like this, you will keep making progress, and eventually the rook is going to run out of squares, and they will be forced to help us win the game. And plus here we also have this check, which is basically a forced rook trade. So I think this is the most beautiful endgame example, because I am beating my opponent by maneuvering two rooks together with a pawn, not even using the free piece that they gave me. Because what I really wanted to teach here is how you can get this winning endgame. This was the endgame that I have been talking about the entire video. So I'm happy that I don't really have to use that knight, that I can just use the rooks to show how this works. So yeah, it's still the same. It's still the same. We play this, If they take, we promote. If they don't, we move up. And they won't be able to do that one more time because, yeah, we will just be winning. Okay, and they finally decide to do this, which is to just be very passive and double attack the pawn. They still cannot really do anything. So what I would do if I didn't have the knight, it depends a little bit. You could play this rook over and basically ignite the trade, and then you have a final rook, and then it depends what else you have. Or you could just start playing with the king and the pawns, and they are very, very passive. What I will do here is I will see if I can get my knight involved. I mean, there's no reason not to use the knight if we have it. So I think getting the knight to d6 is good. But if you didn't have the knight, what you would want to do there is you would want to play on the other side of the board and just have the rooks be very passive, while all rooks can also at any point like influence this position from the side. And that is how you could win an endgame. Because black is also just completely out of moves. Like everything that they play is just losing. And that's why they are already like giving away 3 pawns, which I'm actually going to accept. And they don't really have anything. And my rooks are actually still useful. And they cannot do anything. So even if you didn't have a knight, that is how you can win this. Activate the king, use the pawns, and they are just very, very passive. These 2 rooks are the most terrible pieces. So yeah, black doesn't have any moves, even if I don't use the knight. And they resigned, which is very good. So this was a very good example. If you want to learn more about this opening, go to my course platform, pegasuschess.com.